Hi everyone, I would like to talk about shadow shape before we watercolor nectarine. Shadow shape including form shadow and cast shadow. As you can see here, there's a line separating light and the dark. Cast shadow is the shadow not on the object. Cast shadow is not in the object itself, but is caused by the object. Form shadow also including core shadow and reflected light. Because of reflected light, it forms a core shape we call it core shadow. You can see that that part is darker and it looks like an apple core. Pitch shadow is the darker shadow between cast shadow and the form shadow. On the light area, we have highlight and also the halftone. Now we're going to practice shading with charcoal pencil. Hold your pencil like this, but not like you are writing. Use your whole arm to move and form a circle. You might want to draw a couple more times until you are satisfied with your circle. Now look at the cast shadow is over the half of the circle. You can also thinking about the light is coming in the 30 degrees. That area, cast shadow will not go over. Half a circle, the cast shadow is a little bit below the half of the circle. Now we are going to form a value scale. Split the value scale to half, and from there split half again. One more time. We'll color light it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're going to start it with the form shadow. Form shadow is less than a half. Here I'm using the same weight and started to shade from the square 4 all the way to scale 8. Using the same weight, started to shading your form shadow and cast shadow. Try to shade it as even as possible, one stroke at a time. Don't try to rush through it, but be aware of the way that you put it on the paper. I now started to shade my scale 5. Instead of up and down, I now change to left to right. I shaded from scale 8 all the way till 5. I using the same weight and started to shade my form shadow. I leave out my reflected light and shade the cast shadow as well. Remember not to rush each stroke and try to shade it evenly. The reflected light is on the scale 4. Now I'm going to shade my value 6. I'm using the pencil diagonal direction. I place one more time on the form shadow. And also the cast shadow. On the value 7, I'm going back with up and down stroke. Here I'm going to use the value 7 for my cast shadow. The last one is the pitch shadow. Now we are working with the light area. I'm placing the halftone. I'm trying to blend them in as smooth as possible. I then use the needle eraser to erase the highlight. Now we are ready to watercolor a sphere. Make sure you use your whole arm to draw a circle and an ellipse shape for the cast shadow. I'm showing you 2 different ways to watercolor sphere. On the first sphere, I mixed the water with the crimson. As you can see here, I didn't use too much water. I am watercolor from dark to light. I watercolored the shadow shape first, which is the cast shadow and the form shadow. I then clean my brushes and mix a touch of crimson for my light area. I turned my paper and used the gravity to finish my halftone. For the second sphere, I used more water with a touch of crimson and watercolored my first layer. As you can see here, the paper appeared to be very shiny. I must wait until not so shiny for me to put the second layer. While meantime waiting for my paper to dry, I check on my first sphere and it's fairly dry that I can lay down my second layer for the cast shadow. I go back in and fix my form shadow. For the reflector light, I use the thirsty brushes, meaning a clean and dry brush to lift the colors up. For my light area, I need to place a little bit darker layers. I use the water and mix a little bit of crimson. You can see there's a hard edges. I use thirsty brushes and soften the edges. I also use the 30 brushes and pick up the colors for the highlight. The second sphere is ready for the cast shadow and the form shadow. As you can see here, the paper is not completely dry, so it gives me a very nice blurry edges. To speed up the drying process, I use the blow dryer. Make sure your paper is fully and completely dry. Then use the crimson with a very, very little water and finishing up the pitch shadow on the sphere. As the paper dries, the color becomes lighter. So I go back and put another layer of crimson on the form shadow. For the second sphere, I am started to darken my cast shadow and form shadow. Repeat the same methods using the 30 brushes to soften the hard edges. And then pick up the reflector light. I use a little bit green to make the red become duller and darker. Here I can see that my paper is still wet, so I blow dry it to make sure that paper is completely dry. To dry the paper, one of the purpose is that I can get the hard edges for my pitch shadow. Now we are ready to watercolor the nectarine. I use the pencil to block in the shape of the nectarine. Maybe you might say it's easier just to draw a circle, but if you look closer, it's not a circle. It still have a tilt and an angle, so blocking will be a better choice to draw. I used a soy sauce dish from the Daiso for $1.99. That give me more places that I can mix my color. There's a two group of color I'm going to use. I mix the cami red, which is the warmer red, with the crimson red that is warmer red together. A touch of the blue, more crimson red. I set my brushes apart and I use the same size brushes and started to mix more yellow part of the nectarine, the cami red and Indian yellow. Watch me how I mix those two colors together. I use the crimson red and cami red for my shadow shape. The form shadow and the cast shadow. And for the yellow shape, That will be the halftone, the light area. I flip my paper around to use the gravity, help me to finish it. I then added ultramarine blue to make my red a little bit darker. Here I reinforced my form shadow and cast shadow, the area that appeared to be darker. I then used a synthetic brushes to create the textures with Indian yellow. I covered the white area that I left it white at first, and then using the thirsty brushes to pick up the highlight. I'm showing you another way of doing the nectarine. By wetting the first layer with the yellow, Indian yellow, a little bit of lemon yellow. Make sure your brushes has water. As you can see here, I'm preparing my paper to be wet. I started mixing the red with the crimson and water in the area that is appeared to be red and also darker. As you can see that because the paper is still wet, the color it mixes very nicely. To create the texture using the synthetic brushes, lift up the area that is highlight or is lighter with the thirsty brushes, and then place it back in again if it's needed. Repeating the same method, placing the color, and if you place it too much color, then you can lift again. The paper is very wet right now. I wanted to speed up the drying process. I used the blow dryer, but I'm not drying the paper to completely dry yet. As you can see that the paper, it still has a shine, but not very shiny. That allowed me to place another layer to the paper. I use the ultramarine blue to make my red darker. Here I use it for the cat shadow. Here's a good example of placing a layer when the paper is not completely dry. As you can see here, that instead of laying another color, I started to lift up the colors that is underneath. It doesn't matter how many times I try it, the paper is not taking any more watercolors. So the watercolor just kind of floating on top of the paper. Timing is crucial in doing watercolors. Also, to know the wetness of the paper and when to put another layer on top is also through practice and also through the subconscious mind. I'm here to lay a darker layers on top. As you can see, the hard edges is also formed. I use the thirsty brushes to soften those hard edges. You might need to repeat a couple times to get the result that you like. I use the thirsty brushes to lift up the area that appear to be lighter and also the highlight and reflect the light. I also place a darker value by adding crimson red and ultramarine blue. It is very important that you not just watercolor it, but you get a chance to look back and see what is your natural need. Does it need more contrast? Does it need more darker value? Or do you need to lift up some of the area? Thank you for watching. I hope that this helped your watercolor